Hello, hello, and welcome to episode number 67 of the Wonder of Stuff Vodcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air. Well, I was going to say every weekend because it's written down here, but it's not every weekend. It's not even every other weekend. It's whenever we have time. It's the place you'll find news, information, and commentary from science and engineering, and anything else that's inside our tiny little human brains. As ever, my name is John Gardner, and to help us out on this journey to knowledge, please welcome my colleagues Richard Smith and Ross Davidson. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
And for those of you who are particularly observant, you'll see another face down at the bottom of the screen. This man who I am going to introduce next. And back in episode 65 of The Wonder Stuff, we had a little piece on a new car company in Wales called Riversimple, and they've got a project to change the face of motoring, really, based on a hydrogen fuel cell, or based on hydrogen fuel cells. Clever bits of technology and software, and an entire model where you pay for a service rather than a car itself. After that article, that piece, Andy here, this is the man in the bottom out of the corner, Andy David, who is the software lead from Riversimple, got in touch, pointed out a few things, and we said, come on onto the show. And here he is. So big welcome to Andy David. Hello, Andy.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Very welcome. Nice to have you on. I think we'll probably just start by introducing a bit about yourself and how you got to the stage where you're in, like I said, in a shed in, well, grand shed, but a shed in Wales building hydrogen cars.
Well, I'm an embedded software engineer with experience of writing embedded software and using high integrity processes for safety critical systems. I graduated in '93 with a degree in computer science from Plymouth. Worked abroad for a year in Kharkov, Ukraine. At the time, of course, I was still writing software for computers. But whilst I've been doing that degree, I did an undergrad year at IBM Hursley Park, where I was introduced to embedded software development, where I worked on the audio stream for one of the very, very early I suppose pioneering efforts of desktop conferencing. So of course, this stuff that we're doing now is like the great grandfather of that. And the object of that project was just to allow two people to have a conference over a network in a building. And that was great fun. I enjoyed that immensely. Forwarding on a couple of years, came back from Ukraine. I did a master's degree in VLSI design, which is basically microchips.
That's very large scale integration, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
And again, straight back into the embedded world. I found I went to work for a company based in Gloucestershire. Unfortunately, the company's been broken up and acquired by a large American company. But I was writing the software for a very novel electrohydraulic control system. The sort of thing you'd find on excavators digging up street corners. And it was very cool. It was very efficient, very easy to control, very manageable, mechanically extremely efficient. Didn't produce an awful lot of noise. Because it was mechanically efficient, we were able to squeeze a little more power out of typical systems and use a lot less fuel. Worked on that for I think about 13 years. And then moved on to aircraft systems. I've worked on systems for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and the Airbus A400M military transport plane. I've also done some automotive projects. I was actually the project manager for the Porsche Panamera Mark II dashboard. That's a very, very cool product. It's got night vision on it. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's a physical rev counter, and it's got two 7-inch color screens, sort of mini iPad size. They're not touch screens; they're just display instruments. You can swap them out. You can just have whatever instrumentation you want on there. And some of the things, one of them will become sat nav. The other one could become night vision. That was a cool project. And I've worked on a few defence projects as well.
But we can't talk about those.
And but basically, C and assembly language for embedded systems, where the likelihood of a failure of the software would be someone getting injured or possibly killed, or in the case of some of the aerospace projects, of course, potential multiple fatalities.
So in your line of work, your testing is one of the big things then.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how clever your work is; it's how clever you can demonstrate it is.
Yeah,
that's true. And it's it's the whole thing. It's making sure you understand what it is you're trying to do. You understand the implications of the way you're going about it, and the any undesired characteristics of your design and your implementation. All of these things have to be understood. Requirements captured, design documents constructed. I'm a big fan of things like continuous integration, which help you create a basic platform where you've got something. I don't know if you're familiar with continuous integration. Please stop me if you already know about this. But you could, for example, have a nightly build, have a server just pull your latest source code out of your repository, build it, do unit tests, whatever, static analysis. You turn up into work, check your inbox, and you've got a nice little email telling you how right or how wrong you've got things. And then you can use that as your sort of cue for work during the day.
Excellent. Well, so obviously a varied career history there. So if we bring you up to date now, so when did the Riversimple project start, and when did you come into it?
Well, Riversimple goes back about 15 years. The founder and our chief engineer, I suppose, Hugo Spowers, he was he'd been restoring classic cars, classic racing cars, that sort of thing. I think there's a rumour that he gave Damon Hill his first ever Formula One drive by restoring one of Graham Hill's old cars, and it was the first Formula One car that Damon Hill ever drove. That's only a rumour. I've got nothing. I've got no evidence to back that up. But he was involved in motorsport, and he eventually left because he was concerned about the environmental impact of the sport, and he wanted to do something about it. He quit motorsport, and he said he never wanted to work with cars ever again. So he had to think about what he wanted to get involved in, and the next thing he got involved in, of course, was cars. He started with, I think it was the Life car, which was its LFE car, which is the lightweight, fuel-efficient car, and it was a project that ran with other companies like Morgan were involved. And I think if you just search for Life car on Google, you'll find some information about it. But he's really gone on from there further and further. Hugo's got very big ambitions, and these form the core values of Riversimple, and we all believe that less unsustainable is still not sustainable. We've got a long way to go, and we need to start getting better. Of course, battery electric vehicles are one possible solution.
And I did notice in some of the publicity stuff and some of the video casts of that there's a Tesla in the back of your office somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. It's not ours, unfortunately.
Oh, right.
But yeah, I like Teslas. I'm a huge fan. I think that what Tesla have done to legitimize electric vehicles is incredible. It's probably one of the biggest things in motoring. Of course, not just to legitimize them, but to make them so desirable. But then they are quite expensive, so they have to be desirable for it to work.
Yeah.
But that belonged to one of our visitors.
Ah, right. Okay. So when did you join Riversimple?
I joined last October, so I'm one of the new kids on the block.
Ah, right. Cool.
And one of the gentlemen who works there, my colleague Martin, I got a bit of previous with Martin. We've worked on projects in the past, and we've actually worked for the same company in the past, but not at the same time as well. So I was working actually for a company in Kent, and I was looking. I was wondering about other opportunities, and could there be something, another way in which I could more gainfully employ my talents. And at the same time, Martin got in touch and said, "Do you fancy coming to join us here?" And it was a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, it is. I mean, it's the greatest project I've ever been involved in, and it's brilliant.
And you've been involved in some big projects, so that's saying something.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, for me, there are three things that are important at Riversimple. I mean, the obvious thing is the car, and the car is very clever, and it's very satisfying as an engineer to be involved in a project like that. And we're a small team, we're an incredibly small team, so we have to do a lot of things. So we get exercised over a very broad range of skills, and that really works for me as an engineer and as a person. So the business model for me at Riversimple is the really smart thing. That's where we do start to answer an awful lot of questions. And the company's governance model is extremely interesting as well. How, just what the company stands for and what it means, how it works. But the business model is extremely clever. That's, I think, quite frankly, I think it's a real genius. It's brilliant.
So we touched on this in the last episode when we were doing the piece about Riversimple, and it's you're essentially you never own the car, but it's your car for the purpose of, it's parked outside your house, but you actually pay for a service, and that service is an all-encompassing service, repairs, fuel.
Yeah, insurance.
Everything. Yeah. Insurance as well. I didn't realize that.
The whole works. It's all one cost. There's we're still finalising details, and it is an interesting idea, and and I remember when I first read about it, I thought this is. It took a little while for the penny to drop, because of course when you all of our lives is gearing up. It's all geared towards ownership. We own houses, we own cars, we own lots of things of not insubstantial value. But the key is it's almost always owned. One of the exceptions, of course, are these things. Mobile phones. You tend to get them with a contract, and you don't own the phone until the end of the contract, and it really makes a difference. Because every manufacturing company in the world, their bottom line increases in line basically with resource consumption, and we're going to run out of stuff. And it might not happen within our lifetimes, but it's a fairly irresponsible way to go about things if there are other ways. And the idea is that let's construct a business model that rewards longevity and low running costs. So the idea is we'll build a car which will have a 10 to 15 year lifespan, operating life, which is probably commensurate with an average car that you go out and buy today. And as long as the lifetime running cost of that car is comparable with, say, a petrol or a diesel, then it really can work. Now I think there are other things as well about the we're on the line for hydrogen costs, and there is a usage tariff, I suppose, a usage part of the monthly fee. But really, we would be rewarded for making the car as efficient as possible because we're on the line for the fuel.
So, and I mean, what I did mention, and you pointed out quite correctly that I got wrong, was that you're looking for some crowdfunding, a 3-phase of crowdfunding, and the first phase, and I said, it's £500 because I did a quick look, and that was the big figure. It's £500 for the initial, the lowest investment, but it's actually not. You quite correctly said it was £50.
Yes, that's right.
And indeed, I have spent my £50.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you very much.
Yeah. I signed up and I put it in, and I thought, it's such a great idea.
Yeah.
One of the questions that it's been going around in my mind: do you think that the whole Riversimple idea and this changing the way we have transportation, this method of transportation, this whole service idea, do you think it would have been so easily accepted, or if they hadn't had this electric car movement before now? I mean, it was a little step towards looking at something slightly alternatively.
It's a good question. I don't really know. I think, there's no doubt that electric vehicles are I mean, they're far better now than, of course, they ever have been. I mean, 15 years ago or something like that, the electric vehicles really weren't very good. And now there's, I don't know how many there are, but the Teslas, of course, everybody knows about them. There's the Nissan Leaf, which is an excellent little car. The Renault, is it the Zoe?
Zoe, yeah.
And I think even the Twizy. Now, the Twizy's slightly different, but I think the Zoe and the Leaf have about a 90-mile range, roughly, and it's a great way to get about. I mean, they're quiet, they're comfortable. I mean, the Leaf is, it's like every Nissan, it'll be beautifully built. I'm sure the Renault too. And you don't need to go to a petrol station. You fill them up at home. In effect, if you can leave your car to charge overnight. Now, that might not be how everyone is able to run, but I suppose it might be possible to run them. You charge it up overnight. I had a colleague some years ago who drove his Leaf to work, and they had a deal whereby all the best car parking spots were at the right next to the building. They all had electric chargers for use by electric vehicles only. So he'd drive up, he'd get rockstar parking, he'd charge his car up whilst he was at work, and that gave him enough range to drive home and then drive back into work the following day, where he'd simply charge his car. So it was, he had a great time. It was very inexpensive motoring. But
yeah, I mean, I've been looking towards getting an electric car, and from where I am in relation to work, I would probably get away with only charging up twice a week. So like once on a weekend and once midweek, say, and I could quite happily do that sort of thing.
It is extremely convenient, and of course everyone, all of the particularly the Tesla, like the Tesla fan club, will tell you for as long as you care to listen how superbly efficient the powertrain is, and they are ridiculously efficient. I think 85% efficient in terms of energy in to mechanical energy out. But with hydrogen cars, it's a little trickier because, of course, everyone says, "Oh no, what about the Hindenburg?" And hydrogen's terribly, terribly dangerous. Well, all fuel is. Petrol is fairly hideous stuff. Diesel, likewise. There are several advantages or interesting things about hydrogen cars. First of all, the integrity of the fuel tank. One of my colleagues at Riversimple, he tells everyone that they're actually tested by being shot at with a gun. Now, I don't know which gun, but they're incredibly strong. I mean, a proper order of magnitude stronger than a petrol tank or a diesel tank in a car. So they're far less likely to rupture in any accident. Second of all, interesting point, it only occurred to me a few months after I started working at Riversimple, but the hydrogen is stored in the tank under pressure, which means the only thing in the tank ever is hydrogen. There's never a combustible mix in the tank. Whereas in a fuel tank, of course, there are times when there's a combustible mix of.
And of course, it's the vapor. That bit of vapor is where the potential of an explosion would be.
I mean, it has to be the right ratio of fuel and oxidant, but it can exist. In a hydrogen fuel cell car, there is never at any point a combustible mix of hydrogen and oxygen. Not even in the fuel cell itself, because the hydrogen and the oxygen, which combine to form water and electricity, are actually separated by a membrane, and it's the membrane that breaks up the hydrogen. So I think the protons come through, they mix with the oxygen in the air, produces water, and the electricity as a byproduct. There's never ever a combustible mix of hydrogen and anything else. If anything were to go wrong, and there was a hydrogen leak, it would go up straight in the air. And I'm told that it would go up at a rate of about 20 meters per second, because it weighs, I think, a 14th of the weight of air. So of course, if petrol comes out of a petrol tank, it pools on the floor, and it really is, it ruins everybody's day. We used to have a video at work. Two cars side by side, a hydrogen fuel cell car and a petrol car. Okay, set them on fire. What happens? And there was an invisible hydrogen flame shooting up, and it looked very impressive. But the hydrogen burnt off, and then there's no more fuel, fire went out. Whereas the petrol car was totally destroyed because eventually the petrol comes out, and being a fuel, what happens is it mixes with the oxygen, it ignites, and the whole car was totaled. It was just charred wreckage of. You just had to sweep it up and hide it somewhere. Whereas the fuel cell car, you could simply repair it and drive it away.
So what
about perception issues that we have to overcome? But really, it is quite an inherently safe way of driving a car.
So with the fuel cell, I think myself included, I don't fully understand what the fuel cell bit of it is. We know that in there is hydrogen somehow, but how does it get out and generate? I guess there is some sort of generator in there to produce the electricity in the end.
It's electrolysis in reverse. Now, if you electrolyze water, you get hydrogen, oxygen, and I suppose you start with water, put electricity into it, you get hydrogen and oxygen. And what the fuel cell does, it does that reaction exactly in reverse. And it was discovered by a guy actually in Swansea, just up the road from where I am at the moment. I think it was 1839, but I might be wrong. A brilliant man who was playing with electrolysis, and he just noticed that every time he shut down his experiment, he'd see a reverse in the flow of electricity. And he looked into that, and sometime later invented the fuel cell. And it's just the kind we use is called a PEM, PEM. And by no means am I an expert on fuel cells. I've got very, very limited knowledge on how they actually work at a chemical level. But it's a box, and it's roughly 4 shoe boxes in size. The one in our car weighs 19 kilos, and it produces 8.5 kilowatts, which is roughly sort of 3 kettles worth of power, or 11 horsepower. So for a car, it's pretty weedy. But there's a hydrogen tank which has hydrogen in under pressure, 350 bar. Our car, the tank is sized for 1.5 kilos of hydrogen. I suppose it's about 50 litres, I think 45 or 50 litres. It's roughly the same size as a tank in a fuel tank in a normal car. And it's literally piped into the fuel cell. There's another input on the fuel cell which has a compressor which compresses air and blows it in. So you have hydrogen coming in at one point, air coming in at another, but they're opposite sides of a membrane. Now the fuel cell itself is lots of these things all in a stack, lots of these membranes all in a stack, and that's why a lot of the time they're called fuel cell stacks. And each stack produces a small amount of electrical power. So you can make a fuel cell more powerful just by extending the length of the stack, in theory. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. But the hydrogen comes in and is one side of the membrane. And the membrane is, I think it's a platinum catalyst. And that reacts with the hydrogen and basically splits it up. I think, and I really apologize to any proper scientists and chemists and things like that, people who may get to watch this. But it's something like the proton goes through the membrane, the electron's not allowed. There's a doorman there, and he says, you can't come in, you've not got the right shoes on. And the electron goes off to become some electricity, and the proton goes through the membrane and becomes water because it meets with the oxygen. Hydrogen, and wow. Electricity comes out.
That's a good explanation, actually. Yeah, very good explanation. So
it might not be totally accurate.
Sounds about right.
It sounds about right. What do you think about that, Ross?
That sounds really good.
Ross is our resident physicist.
But even I don't understand the underlying chemical reactions. So yeah, one question we did have in terms of the sort of the fuel cells themselves. Mm-hmm. How do they compare to the batteries you get in an electric car? Are they heavier, about the same sort of in terms of like power to weight produced?
It's a good question, because a battery, you might rate a battery in terms of watt hours or kilowatt hours, whereas a fuel cell, it'll run as long as there's hydrogen to go in it. So we're not really comparing apples with apples. Now we've got an 8.5 kilowatt fuel cell, and it is small. I mean, like I said, it's about the size of 4 shoeboxes. Weighs 19 kilos. There's the hydrogen tank compressor, some plumbing pipework, a couple of regulator valves. I don't know what the total mass is, but our car is 580 kilos. It's very, very lightweight. Now, to put this into context, I'm told that the battery pack of a Tesla S is 440 kilos, and our car will do 300 miles. The Tesla S, I think, was about 220, 240. I mean, it's brilliant range for a battery vehicle. So, it's not quite the same, but it's not massively different. But fuel cells are a very, very lightweight way of getting electricity somewhere. They used to use them in the Apollo space program for that reason. It was the lightest way to get electricity up in space.
Yeah, yeah.
So once the fuel cell has generated the electricity, you don't have any batteries in the car, do you? What you have is capacitors.
That's correct. Yes.
So there's no chemical reaction of storage of the electricity once it's generated. It's I guess static electricity.
That's right. Yes. I mean, capacitors have a lower power density than batteries, but they have a much, much higher energy density. You can get the power in and out far more quickly. And we need this for the regenerative braking. Excuse me. Under braking, we can, up to 0.3 G, we'll only use torque braking. That is electrical braking. And we maximize the amount of kinetic energy that we recapture back as electrical energy. And I don't know how big the battery would have to be to take in the kind of energy that we're regenerating under braking. But it would have to be a lot bigger than we currently, maybe the size of the car or something. It would be very, very large. But the actual caps we use they're hybrid. So there is a small rechargeable battery element to help with the power density. But they're insane devices. They're things of marvel, if you ask me. I'm a pure software guy. They're just things of marvel. They're incredibly efficient. The energy density is astonishing. You can throw thousands of amps at these things, and they just sit there and take it, and then they give 99.9999% of it back to you. They're just astonishing devices.
So are they only used? Are they only charged up by the regenerative braking?
No, we do trickle charge them from the fuel cell.
Okay, yeah.
The idea is that as I said, the car's only 11 horsepower from the fuel cell, but under acceleration or hill climbing, you need more power than that. So that's what the caps are there for.
Right. Okay.
So I think I don't know what 0 to 60 time of the car is touch under 10 seconds, and it does top speed is 60 miles an hour. So it's a really easy test. You just floor it and wait till you stopped accelerating. And it's virtually a linear acceleration curve as well because of the characteristics of electrical motors.
Yeah.
Fuel cell is sized to provide sufficient power for max speed driving. So driving on the flat at 60 miles an hour, 8.5 kilowatts is sufficient for that. And then the caps are there just to provide any additional power for acceleration or for hill climbing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So what? Well, go on, Ross.
I was just going to say, is that using sort of capacitors? Is that sort of unique to your design, or do other electric car manufacturers do a similar sort of thing?
I don't know. I believe all the other battery electrics are batteries.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if.
I'm wondering if so in terms of sort of like the amount of energy you can get back that would otherwise be lost in sort of mechanical heat or whatever from the braking, is the sort of limit that you have. I suppose you will use the regenerative braking unless you sort of floor it, and then I assume you just have normal brakes that kick in. Yeah.
To meet the highway code braking distances, you need a little under 0.7 G braking. So in the case of ours, we get the first 0.3 from electrical braking, and the next 0.4 from friction brakes, foundation brakes.
Yeah, just be interested to know if other technologies where you don't have the capacitors that can take the sort of immediate load of energy have a lower cutoff, so you only sort of get the first 0.1 or something.
Yeah,
so
I think I think the Prius, the Toyota Prius, I think they can regenerate about 10% of the kinetic energy of the car under regenerative braking, and I think the two reasons why it's 10% are that first of all they've only got two wheels by which they can recapture power, because they only drive two wheels electrically, and second of all they're dumping the energy into batteries, which, like you say, they have a limit, they have an energy density.
But with the Razza, you've actually got 4 inline electric motors, haven't you?
That's right. Each wheel is an electric motor, so it's a 4-wheel drive car. It's quite funky, really, and like you said, there's no gears, there's no drive shafts. They're not mechanically coupled in any way other than by the road. So it's a fantastic vehicle to do things like torque vectoring. Which is,
I'm just going to show a picture actually now of the actual car again, just to remind everybody. This is the reason why you've got this. You can have all of this underneath here is because there is no drive shaft and no prop shaft and yes. There's no axles in there or anything. So you've got this big.
It's completely flat, absolutely completely flat. And there are some compromises of having the motor actually in the wheel, unsprung mass being the thing, and you try and minimize your unsprung mass for handling the car. Unsprung mass is the amount of mass that's not sprung. Most of the car is sprung mass because it's on the suspension, but we've got the motors in the wheels. It doesn't really make a big. If it was a racing car, we wouldn't have done it that way. And I'm by no means an expert in vehicle dynamics. We've got some quite gifted individuals at Riversimple who relieve me of that problem. But for a car like this, it's really not an issue.
So tell me about where your software bits come in, and I guess it's fairly fundamental to the car.
Yes, there's quite a lot of software control. Everything's controlled by software on the car, but I think that's probably true of almost all cars these days anyway. ECU controls for internal combustion engines are fantastically advanced, and it's actually a lot simpler in our car because you can drive the wheels directly. You can simply request torque. Please give us, say 50 Newton meters of torque, and the car will roll forwards. When we want to brake, again we're requesting things. Everything in the car, almost everything other than our software, I suppose, is available off the shelf today. You can just go out and buy it. Take a bit of money, of course. Having fuel cells are quite expensive, but everything's off the shelf. There's nothing groundbreaking in the actual bill of materials. But all the software has to do is manage the fuel cell, and that is work out how much, what kind of power we need to draw from it continuously. Manage the torque, manage the safety of the vehicle. Of course, when we've got so much safety, so much software in the car, then we're actually working to a standard called ISO 26262, which is the automotive safety standard for electrical, electronic, and software in cars.
So it really is a drive-by-wire.
Yes.
And did you get? Is this stuff that you can bring in from your work with the aeroplanes?
It's largely the integrity side of things.
Right.
And you get used to writing requirements in such a way that they're testable, and testable in a very direct manner. What I said a minute ago about the brakes being mechanical, the brakes. We have mechanical brakes, and the brakes have to work in the event of an electrical failure. So the brakes are still sized to halt the car. So it's drive-by-wire and it's brake-by-wire, but it's also, if everything goes wrong, heaven forbid, and I really hope it doesn't, it means I haven't done my job properly, then there is sufficient mechanical braking to brake the car. But it's, I tend to, as I work on projects and I learn what worked, what things work well in what context, it's like you build up a little mental toolbox of these things, and you simply just bring them out in the next project as you're working along. You think, I've seen this thing before. These things didn't work. These things did work, and I'll try and bring whatever technique, whatever kind of thinking has worked in the past. So I'm using things that I've occasionally I use a hardware solution implemented in software, or I know things. There are most of my work on aircraft has been verification. So you get used to writing requirements in a way that they're very directly testable. So a lot of the engineering that I'm doing in the software is actually sort of a step back from the software. It's not in the implementation itself, but it's in all of the definitions and the control and the integrity. So hopefully when someone comes and they say, we'd like to see exactly why you thought that was a good idea, Mr. David, I have all of the necessary information ready at hand.
Excellent. I guess, right, so I've got a question down here, and this is just an observation. So there's two questions, actually. The first one is, if we look at the, let's have a look. Is that a picture? Yeah, that would probably show it. This is one of the, so your, the tires on the Raza are very, very thin.
That's right.
Is that because of the motors, or is that because you want to reduce rolling resistance? Or
rolling resistance is a big deal for us. I mean, the gentleman driving the car there, that's actually Hugo Spowers, the founder of Riversimple, and the gentleman in the passenger seat is my colleague Martin. And it was -7 on that day when we hit the car out. That was the first day we ran the car on the public highway, I'm sure. But yeah, the tires are the rolling resistance of the tires is a big deal for us. We have to minimize any series inefficiency, any series loss. So the rolling resistance is a big deal. Plus, because it's quite a light car, we wouldn't really be well served by a wide tire. And again, I'm not. I know very little about tires. They're just sort of round black things you stick on the wheel. If you imagine the contact patch all 4 tires have with the ground, we don't want that to be particularly large, because then that reduces, I suppose, maybe the chemical grip between the rubber and the road. And again, I've got very little idea about tires. Tire dynamics, I appreciate, is quite a complex. I understand it's the characteristics of the rubber and the road. There's an awful lot to it. But what we can do, because our wheels aren't mechanically coupled, it's as good a platform, I think, as there can be for torque vectoring. So we can really exploit the characteristics of the tires, and it's very simple for us to do so. We can really change algorithms, and there's no mechanical overhead. We don't need to invent a new kind of clutch or a new kind of drive shaft or anything like that. We can model it in software and implement it and test it. So it's a very cool platform to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
I was going to say, in terms of sort of the complexity of the software that's in the car, does it have the sort of like, when you've heard of cars that can control 4 wheels independently, it's very much used for things like stability control and stuff like that. If a wheel's found slipping, it sort of puts more power in and dynamically monitors that. So is that all part of the is it Raza? Is it Raza car as well?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, we start off with everything simple. I mean, like Riversimple. We like to keep things simple. We believe in the simplicity that comes on the other side of complexity. But yes, it's if you're driving down the road, you turn, and as the back end of the car steps out, is there a way that we can direct torque around the car to minimize that, or to bring that back, bring it under the control of the driver, in such a way that we're not really interfering with what the driver wants to do? And I think we can work on these things for decades, for as long as we care to. There's so many tricks. There's a lot of companies doing work. Of course, it started all, I suppose, with Audi back in the 80s with their Quattro system. I think what they used to do was actually apply a brake to particular wheels. Whereas these days the thinking is a lot more in delivering additional torque to certain other corners of the vehicle to try and pull it away from the slide. But it's a perfect platform for that, because we just generate 4 torque demands, send them to the wheels. The software is constantly monitoring what the wheels are doing in terms of their rotational speed, their current draw, Any internal, of course, statuses that they're continuously reporting. I forget how many times, like 200 times a second or something. So it's there's an awful lot of information there that we can make decisions upon, and we're using model-based development to develop this software using MATLAB. So we've got a fantastic system where we can have an algorithm embodied in a model, or we can create a simulation around that, and basically we can put in test cases and leave it to figure out all of the results overnight. As these things become more and more and more complex, there are so many corner cases, there are so many genuine use cases, accelerating uphill, accelerating downhill, braking uphill, braking downhill, going around corners. There's huge amounts of simulations that we can do, and we can actually simulate, put a simulation around our implementation of, say, torque vectoring and phased braking, and see how the vehicle handles. We could, in the prospect of building up a whole load of intellectual property and expertise on simulating vehicle dynamics, just for a small little two-seater hydrogen car. But it's exciting stuff. I know I should have more friends and get out more.
But the thing is that you were saying that, and from what I've read, is that the intellectual property thing is not the important thing.
That's right.
I mean, you were I don't know whether you're still doing it, but considering doing it as an open source.
That's right. Yeah. Value in cars is not so much in the actual car itself; it's in the brand, and we see this with companies like, I suppose, VW, Seat, Skoda, the VAG group. They're all the same car, but they have a different badge on the front. But yet we still pay more for an Audi than we would for a Seat. And it's pretty much the same car. We're all happy with this, as consumers. We don't seem to mind. We like the fact that some brands are more valuable than others. I don't know why that's true, but it seems to be the case. So that's one observation. The second observation is that you gents are probably similar vintage to me. You remember Betamax video recorders. Now, Betamax and VHS were the two standards at the time, and then shortly after, Betamax disappeared. And what we would like to do is, if Sony are capable of losing a standards war, because Sony, of course, Betamax was their product. If Sony can lose a standards war, then Riversimple are going to have no chance. So it's our way of addressing that is to open source things, rely on the fact that our brand will have the value rather than the car itself and the things in the car. And of course there may be subsequent benefits to this, as I forget who said it, but with enough eyes any bug is shallow. So it's interesting, and like I said, it's one of the things about the business model of Riversimple has a lot of these ideas embodied within it, and it's it really does answer a huge amount of questions.
So what's the next step for Riversimple? I mean, you've got cars now that the publicity is starting. There's lots of media. I see podcasts. I see, like I said, Robert Llewellyn's fully charged Vodcast did a whole section on it, and a lot of conventional media are picking up with it as well. So what's the next? I guess what's the stages left before somebody can drive one of these?
Right, we've done a lot of publicity this year. We did started off end of January this year. We did some promotional filming. We took the car around London. We visited a lot of magazines, Top Gear magazine, Autocar, Tech Toys, FT, Top Gear magazine. I can't even remember now. We spent pretty much a whole week, and it was a very regimented. Right, we've got to go here now. There's a couple of hours, and then we've got to go there a couple of hours.
Now you know what film stars feel like when they're promoting films.
But the next thing for us is, and of course, there was Robert Llewellyn Vodcast, which was great. There was another one, Gareth Jones on Speed.
I listened to that podcast as well. That was really good.
And The next big thing for us is we're doing a 20-car beta trial, and we're going to make 20 cars. It's probably it looks like it's going to be in Monmouth, in South Wales, and we'll have a fueling station there, and we have 20 cars, and it'll be a 12-month beta trial, and we want to see how people use the car, and of course whether there are any improvements we can make to it during that 12 months. And it's a study on how the car is used, how it performs under those kinds of conditions, how people relate to it. And that's our next big thing.
And I guess also in the background, a lot of your management will be thinking ahead about the rest, all of the other constituent parts that make up the Riversimple service. Like, for instance, how do we get fuel to place X? Because currently we're very low on hydrogen filling stations.
It's ironic, isn't it? It's the most abundant element in the universe, but we don't seem to have any. There's a company called ITM, and they can actually build you a hydrogen refueling station. They can, I suppose, in theory, put it in your back garden, and it can. They've got brilliant technology. They can actually make the hydrogen on site. And I think they can even do it completely renewably from, particularly in Great Britain, from gathered rainwater and sunlight. I don't know quite how long it would take to generate enough to cover the rivers.
But if it's to do with sunlight, it'll be a lot longer in the northeast of England, I tell you.
Well, it's a bit grim in South Wales as well. The sky is very low. But these things are possible. We've got a long way to go before there's a real working infrastructure, but the more we look at it, I mean, the more we seem to dig up these little corners of real desire for this sort of thing. I mean, I suppose there's been talk of a hydrogen economy for some time, but there's incredible inertia with these things. But there's initiatives, I suppose, in Northern Europe. I forget where, but they're building enough hydrogen fuel cell hydrogen refueling stations along the length of the country that you can, in theory, drive up and down the country. In a fuel cell car, there'd be enough stations to do that. And these are incredible things. I mean, the car will have, the Riversimple car, it's got a range of 300 miles. It's designed to be a local car, but in theory, you can get in it and drive 300 miles away. Problem is, of course, you can't fill up and come home at the moment. The idea is it's a local car. You'd use it. That would be your sort of weekly range. The amount you drive in a week, but you tend to do it round a central hub, and that's one of the ideas behind the 20-car trial. Is we put a hub somewhere, a refueling station, and then people go about their daily business, shopping and whatever they do, but they never got that far away.
But you say, it's a good point you make there, because you say this is a local car, but you also have the plans for this, which is a full saloon.
Yes.
Now that's obviously a family car, and the chances are that will go slightly further away than local.
Yes. Oh, I can't give too many details away about that at the moment. You will notice a very strong family resemblance between that car and the Raza. The guy who heads up our designs is a guy called Chris Wright. Chris has got a lot of previous in the world of car design. He was in charge of, I think, Fiat's design when they redid the Fiat 500 some years ago. He's a bit special, is Chris. He's got a lot of previous.
Well, it's funny actually, because when I saw the Raza and I saw the 5-door version there, or the 4-door version, I thought of this, which is the Honda Insight.
That's a cool car. There was a guy that worked for us, our powertrain architect, a guy called Nico. He had one of those, and there's an awful lot of Nico in the car.
Yeah, well, that interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but totally not related, though.
No. So carry on.
The Raza, the bodywork for the Raza was inspired by a car called the Berlin Rome, which was a Porsche from many decades ago. And if you Google Porsche Berlin Rome, It's a black car. It's got spats on the front and the rear wheels, which is unusual. The front wheels are sort of inset slightly, so you can still actually turn them. But that was one of the things that Chris used as his inspiration.
Oh yes,
yeah, John furiously googling.
It's true. It's true. I'll see if I can. Let me just show an old black and white photograph here of that.
Cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And I don't know what vintage. I don't know quite how old that car is, but you can tell it's. It's. I think it's pre-40s, but I don't know. I wish I knew more about the Porsche history, being a Porsche fan.
Well, I mean it's a great time to wrap up this episode. It's been great. You've given us loads of information, loads of stuff that we didn't understand that we now only slightly more understand, but we're getting there.
There was one other question which I think was briefly touched on before. What's the origin of the name Riversimple? Is it just obviously the simple part when you mentioned keep things simple, but why Riversimple?
Well, the history behind it is that we used to have an office in Ludlow, and there was a very picturesque river going past. So people naturally assume that was part of the name. But I think the actual story is Hugo had he brought together a number of people, sort of friends and people he's worked with in the past, very, very bright, creative people. Put them in the room and they discussed things about what could they. It had to be a good name for a car manufacturer. And kind of reflect values of the company, and they spent all day doing it and didn't come up with much. And then a short while later, Hugo's son came up with the name Riversimple because
excellent.
And we've sort of retrospectively figured out how to make it fit. Rivers being generally a source of power and considered a great asset and a great help to mankind and the environment. And simple because simple works. For me, I usually stand a chance with simple.
Excellent. Well, that's great, Andy. Thank you very much for being on this episode and explaining all the bits that I got wrong in the original one and telling us a lot more. And I hope you'll come back at some time when things progress to a stage. Yeah, cool. Right, so the usual stuff at the end here. We've got all of the usual contact details. You can email us on wonderstuff@gmail.com if you've got any comments, any hints, tips, anything that you want to point out to us like Andy did and say that's wrong. There'll be a lot of it. We just make it up as we go along, And there's the blog, which is wonderstuff.com. And that has all of the archive of everything we've done and also some topics and some reading lists and various stuff like that. And, of course, there's the new Wonder Stuff Twitter feed at Wonder Stuff where we have we post lots of scientific, technical, engineering stuff when it fits us and normally comment on it as well as it's going out. So we've got loads of mechanisms for you to get feedback back to us if you're enjoying or not enjoying what we do. But until the next time, I guess that's time to leave it. So we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, gents.
Cheers.